Morning, Merlin. Glenn Jessome here, President and CEO of Silver Tiger Metals. Very pleased to have Dave Duncan with me, our VP Exploration this morning for a deep geological dive on the Tiger. How are you this morning?
Yeah, good, thanks. All good. Good to see you. Are you ready for Christmas?
Well, you're never really ready for Christmas. I have two young children running around, so we'll be there. We always are ready. We're just not ready early.
Excellent. Well, the Silver Tiger's been giving you some good Christmas presents, that's for sure, even if the market hasn't.
We're very pleased with how everything's gone for the Tiger this year. You know, unlimited capital raising with the top institutions in the world, killing it with the drill bit. And that's why our share price is really on the way up when most of our peers, unfortunately, due to the market conditions, have been on the way down. So we're very, very pleased. It's going to be a very Merry Christmas, Merlin.
Yeah, absolutely. You totally held your level while the rest of the market, as you said, has come down. Now, I've had a look at some of your previous Crux interviews. I've heard you talking with Matt. I've looked at the recent news releases. And for me, what I'd really like to do is kind of get a better understanding of the geology and really understand kind of where you're putting your efforts and what this thing might look like in the months ahead. So is it possible to... Well, actually, but before we start, could you give a quick background to you or an introduction to yourself and kind of describe how you've worked on this project and your relationship with Silver Tiger? That'd be great.
Thanks, Merlin. Yeah, my name's Dave Duncan. I'm the geologist. I'm the vice president exploration for Silver Tiger. And like Glenn mentioned earlier, we purchased this property about 6 years ago now. And because we were very, very excited about this high-grade former producer in the Sierra Madre Mountains at the northern end of Sonora State. And the aspect that really sold us on this was the 30-year production history, high-grade silver. And that was what we wanted to find more of. So my background in geology and exploration extends back over 40 years, 3 or 4 different continents. But I've been working in Mexico, the Sierra Madre, in particular, epithermal low sulfidation deposits for the last 10 years.
And you, am I correct in thinking that you worked with Glenn on Go Gold as well? So you've already got that history together.
Yes, in fact, that was some of the first work when I went to Mexico, was to work on the Parel tailings, the resource estimations, and all of the Go Gold projects since that time. And Silver Tiger's been there along with that, and so we did all the first drilling there in 2016, 2017, a bit more in 2020, and a lot of drilling this past year.
I'm sorry, at Silver Tiger?
Yes, at Silver Tiger.
And how did, geologically, how far away is this from the Go Gold kind of district?
Oh my gosh, it's probably 1,000 kilometers, Merlin. It's the Silver Tiger project's right up at the northern end, just south of the US border of the Sierra Madre. Our current Go Gold projects are down near Guadalajara, close to 1,000 kilometers away.
Okay, sorry, I've never worked in Mexico. I'm just getting my head around it.
It's a fascinating place. The Sierra Madre volcanic package is almost a couple thousand kilometers long, and there's metal deposits the whole length of it. So there's big world scale camps all through it.
And similar style, kind of epithermal, low sulfidation.
Yes, it's a whole family of deposits, but they're all similar, but each have some of their own characteristics. But they usually always involve the same layer cake geology of volcanic package, consisting of an upper volcanics that's usually a more rhyolitic composition, and then andesitic type compositions down on what they call their lower volcanic package. And through all of those things, there's these big regional structures. The veins are usually placed along those regional structures, those corridors. And sometimes there's a secondary set of faults that splays go off, but usually it's these big structures that you have to follow. That's where the vein systems usually occur. And that's pretty common through all the camps, Merlin.
And in Silver Tiger, do they have a kind of a metal zonation? Have you picked up some kind of any change in the composition of the kind of the ores? You know, is there more zinc or kind of the metallic distribution vertically?
Yeah, well, that's a common theme too. That these systems have a height of about 1,000 meters, sometimes a bit taller, sometimes a bit shorter. Usually, the silver, gold, precious metal is closer to the top or at the top. And then as you get deeper and deeper, you transition down into the base metal part of the system. At Silver Tiger, we have some topography that helps us understand that, because at the north end, and Glenn, maybe you could bring up one of the geological slides, the plan map of the property. But at the northern end of where we've been mapping and working, we're only at an elevation of about 1,200 meters, Merlin. Glenn, maybe you could show that Polaris area. And up in that area it's mostly all a silver and base metal system. But as you move south down towards where the old mine is, you're going up in topography to almost 2,300 meters, Merlin. And up at that elevation, almost a full kilometer higher, we're pretty much just a base metal system with the classic copper, lead, zinc as well. But it's really the precious metals are the dominant set up there. And here on this slide, you can see some of the aspects too about this layer cake geology that I was mentioning. The pinkish colored units to the right-hand side of that slide, those are the upper volcanic rhyolitic compositions. And the green, the yellow is the transition zone down into the lower unit, the greenish colored units, which are the andesitic rocks. And Glenn, maybe you could just sketch along where the big fault system that breaks through all of these things. And that's the dominant structural trend where the veins are in place. Yeah, that's
okay. So the primary structures are southwest to northeast. Is that what you're saying? Or but I thought you said that the main vein systems tend to run parallel to the primary structure, which looks more or less north-south here.
That's correct, yes. And Glenn, maybe you can just sketch that on. That's the trend of the regional fault, Merlin. And there are some cross faults through this as well, where there's some offshoots.
Are those younger brittle cross faults, or? They
tend to be all related to the same thing, and it creates some interesting, what in Mexico is called clavos, or where a minor fault crosses the major fault. You tend to have a focus or a local higher grade aspect that they call clavos. We would call that ore shoot, and that's a really an interesting feature as well on this property.
And just going back to that, when the main regional structure was drawn on, it looked as if there's a kind of an orientation of kind of subparallel vein sets coming off that. Is that a kind of repeatable feature that you see with these kind of subparallel, let's call them pure north-south sets at a low angle to the primary structure?
Yes, and Glenn, maybe you could switch to the more detailed map for this, where we can see it. It's the break. We tend to refer to it, Merlin, as more of a corridor. It's not just a single fracture that happens over 5 or 10 meters. It tends to be a zone of fracturing that's happening over 200, 300, 500 meters. And what we see are 2 or 3 vein sets in place along through this. Here, Glenn's just showing some of the 3D aspects of it with the topography, but you can see how the structures are following along the side of the mountain here. Everything daylights. We can really follow this very easily, Merlin, from an exploration point of view.
That's going to be my next question. Can you see it? Can you see it with aerial photography or LiDAR, or can you just map it?
Both, and you can actually almost fall into open stopes in places too, because the old people came right up to surface. The rock has a very distinct discoloration from the alterations in those areas. So it's really a light beige cream colored surface with a big brown stain where the veins have come right on up through.
And a lot of the news flow in the last 8 months has been about the crackle breccia. I mean, I think you first started calling it a footwall zone, and then you've shifted to calling it a crackle breccia because you see it both sides of the quartz veins, the high grade quartz veins. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of the relationship or kind of the formation of that crackle breccia? Is it a hydrothermal breccia, or is it a structural breccia?
We believe it's a structural breccia, and I say that in the sense that when we first observed it, we saw it on the footwall side of the Sooy Vein, completely unexpected. We had no idea from all the historical information that we'd compiled that this kind of thing sat adjacent to the veins. Everything that we had told us it was just the classic vein. So when the guys started first looking at this stuff, was it a breccia? Was it a hydro? All the questions you just asked. But we've really come down to now, there's sort of two or three factors that have come together, and it's structural and it's stratigraphic. This new style of mineralization that we're seeing is occurring in only one particular subunit of the flat formation. It's about a 30-meter thick shale unit. And when the veins pass through that particular horizon, on the footwall side, we're seeing this rock really get shattered. It takes on this brecciated look. It's a structural feature, but it's all filled full. The matrix is all sulfide and quartz. The rock is heavily silicified. So that's why it's kind of gone through 2 or 3 generations of naming, but we're very pleased that it's there. It's high grade. And we've now, through continued drilling through the year, Merlin, have seen it occurring on the Seitz Kelley Vein, on the Sooy Vein, and up to the north on the Benjamin Vein. And that's where this whole stratigraphic side of the model starts becoming very important for us, because we're now seeing this happen on all 3 of our major veins when they're passing through this one particular layer over several kilometers of strike length now.
Sorry, I might have missed it, but the flat formation, which you said is about 30 meters thick or up to 30 meters thick, what is it?
Well, the flat formation is actually about 100 to 150 meters thick, the way it historically has been compiled. And these are units and names that go back to the mining 100 years ago, that we've just carried through with the usage of that. But there's it's a series of different ignimbrites and tuffs and flows, and now a shale unit that were classically all lumped together as the flat formation. But and we, in our early work on the property, we're always drilling above that and they higher up in what was called the Tigre formation, and that's where we find the gold deposit that we currently worked on in 2016, 2017, where the 1 million ounce resource of gold equivalent is sitting up higher, about 150 meters up stratigraphy. But down in this flat formation, we didn't know too much about it until we just started drilling this past year, because all of our drilling was targeted above it. And that's where we've been finding the shale unit. And it only just happened that when we drilled this first hole 202 at the Sooy Vein, we were targeting the white quartz vein, but we were targeting it beneath the last mining level. And that just happened to be where the shale unit is too. And when we passed through that, and it was so wonderfully mineralized, strongly mineralized, that's when we recognized we had a brand new aspect, a brand new discovery on this property that no one had known about before.
But I'm still just trying to get my head around it. So you've got the flat formation is let's call it 130, 150 meter intercalated series of volcanic strata, ignimbrites, which are these hot, they come out hot and they weld themselves together. You've got tuffs and lava flows, and yet in there's a period of sedimentary deposition where you've got a shale forming.
That's correct. A very quiet period, very fine-grained rocks, beautifully laminated. Looks like they were just put down yesterday. No deformation to speak of in it, until you get close to where those veins have gone through and all the structural aspects have broken them up.
Do you have an feeling yet of what the kind of the zone of influence is of the fault or the structure into that subhorizontal formation? Good
question. We're learning more about it. Each drill hole is really the correct answer. But what we do know is that we've been intersecting this mineralization almost 20 meters away from the vein proper. We don't really have all the closely spaced drill holes in there yet to tell us the exact, but we have seen this high-grade aspect 20 meters away from the vein. So how far out it goes, we don't know yet. That's something that we're going to be finding out this year.
And it's both sides of the quartz vein.
Yes, but we only have a handful of holes that have hit on that, let's call it the hanging wall side. Most of it's been on the footwall side so far, but we're finding that it's on both sides of the vein. Yes.
Okay, so if you've got a subvertical vein, you'll be coming in this way, and anyway,
we're drilling from the hanging wall side to the footwall side, just because of the lay of the land, the topography. There's quite a steep hill, and so we're, if the pen represents the drill hole, the veins over here, we're drilling in and hitting it on the hanging wall side and going through onto the footwall side.
So in essence, what you've got, or potentially what you've got, is a zone of mineralization, which is, let's ignore the shale for the moment, but just the vein. You've got the vein which is vertically continuous with a relatively consistent width to it, which when it cuts across a particularly favorable horizon, in this case the shale, you suddenly get this kind of blowout both sides. So it's kind of like a kind of a bulge and you'll be effectively chasing that intersection of that 30-meter shale boundary or shale unit as it intersects the planes of the veins.
Correct. And so we're altering our drill program somewhat, in the sense that we were originally just drilling on sections and drilling fences of holes, following the vein down dip, because the old people mined this for a dip length of close to 500 meters. It's a very tall, strongly mineralized system. But now we're sort of changing our ideas to look at this a more focused aspect, where the veins, all three of the vein sets, the Seitz Kelley, the main Tigre, and the Sooy, are all passing through the shale unit, to see if we can have the 2-for-1 aspect of high-grade vein and high-grade wall rock on the footwall and hanging walls.
Yeah, and of course the key difference is that when you've got a 30-meter, let's say by 10 or maybe 15 meters each side of the vein, maybe as far as 20 meters, which is what you've indicated that you've hit it at. So if you've got that both sides, that's potentially 40 meters, maybe even 50 meters. You can add your ounces much more quickly when you've got greater volume of rock.
Incredible difference for the resource aspect and the implications. It seems to be very, very high grade. We see the base metal mineralization as it's strongly mineralized. And then, down the road, eventually, when we start looking at the reserve aspect of it, it's going to be all low cost mining compared to working on just a meter or meter and a half wide vein. So it has all the benefits of quickly putting a resource picture together, high grade, and it looks like it could be amenable to a low cost mining solution too.
And low cost mineable, you probably mechanize. I mean, if you've got 30 meters, and presumably the shale is not the most competent rock, so you're going to have to manage that engineering aspect of it. But that's fine. That's a problem that the engineers can deal with. Could we have another look at the plan map of the main vein sets, please?
One of the really interesting things, Marilyn, is that we have our main access tunnels into the old mines pass right through this shale area. And we've actually got a couple of drill pierce points of the high-grade mineralization that are just a few meters away from some of these access tunnels. So in the new year, we'll have the engineers up to the site to examine the old workings, tell us what needs to be done to make them safe, to rehabilitate them, to get some access in, to take a look at some of these areas in the underground.
But you've already had a huge amount of underground access, haven't you? I mean, you've taken a whole lot of channel samples on the vein sets. So is this new channel sampling, or is this?
What we found in the archives was all of the original historical channel sampling from these underground workings, and it was close to 20,000 samples altogether.
Okay, so that was a desktop study rather than an actual send the guys underground.
Exactly, but 40 years ago, there was a company, Anaconda Copper, were in the mine. They took quite a few samples too. We have all that information, and in some of the shallower workings up higher, our teams have been inside those and mapped them, and we've collected about 1,000 samples of ourselves. But historically, all of this, the whole mine is sampled, and we've got that database all
So
compiled now.
So what's on the screen here, these underground workings, that's digitized from historic paper workings?
Correct. The original maps all survived because the Anaconda Copper Company found them at the time 40 years ago. And all of that information was transferred up to the archives at the University of Wyoming. And where we gained access to that, we've got digital copies of everything. Then we had our team in Mexico digitize it for, almost a year to get all this stuff all brought in to our current models. And we've combined now the new LiDAR surface topography, all of our surface mapping, sampling, drilling, everything's all been fully integrated now into this 3D model. And here you're looking at some of that black is the images of the old stopes on some of the veins. So we have an understanding of where the old people were actually mining some of that. Here you can see that one vein crossing and hitting the central vein. And that really formed a very rich high-grade clavos right through that area there that Glenn's showing. And by high grade, I mean historical grades up at in silver at 5, 10, 20 kilograms per ton, and even higher in places. And the gold values can get up as much as an ounce per ton and 30 grams.
Well, a clavo in Spanish is a nail. So, I mean, and that's the exact profile of a plunging chute.
Yes.
Could we have a look at the plan, please? Just the plan map of the veins. That one, perfect. Okay, just for scale, there we go. That's the 500-meter bar at the bottom.
Yes.
And obviously, you've got these multiple targets now. You're targeting the vein itself, but you're also targeting the preferably targeting the intersection with this one formation. Does it come to surface? Is your understanding of the stratigraphy driven by your drill hole data, or are there other tools that you can use for targeting that key formation?
Good question. But the simple answer is this stratigraphic package is well exposed on the side of the mountain. All of these formations are mappable units. The cliff formation actually forms a big physical cliff face. At 50, 60 meters tall, you can follow this around the sides of the mountains very easily. We have seen outcrops of the shales, but in the places where we've seen them, they're away from the vein sets, so they're not mineralized. So there was no clue to this aspect until we started actually drilling and piercing through them.
But you can use them as an exploration. You can, even if you find them away from the vein set, you can use their aspect, their dip, their thickness, their competency to infer where they're likely to target your drilling. But I guess you'll find that through drilling anyway as you go.
Well, I'm going to ask Glenn just to circle the Protectora vein area, because this area is about 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers north of the historical workings. And up there, we've been drilling some very shallow holes, relatively speaking, in the sense that we're up above in the higher stratigraphic units. But there was one older drill hole from 40 years ago where they actually pierced through the shale unit. It was away from the vein sets, so it's not mineralized. But we know the shale is all up underneath this portion of the property too. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at here in the new years, to see how extensive this shale unit is, where we know there's vein sets that are strongly mineralized.
Okay, now while we've got this plan up, can you highlight where you've intersected this, the crackle breccia?
Yeah, let's just start at the Benjamin vein first, Glenn. Just maybe you could draw a circle around that. We've hit it here. And you'll see some of those assay results in our last press releases. Down at the Sooy Vein, Glenn, maybe you can show where the 202 is. We've hit it there. We hit it down at the south end of the Sooy Vein, down at the San Carlos, down there. And now when we started drilling in November, we've hit it over on the Seitz Kelley Vein. where we drilled our first holes there. And just before the Crux, well, I just came back from Mexico, but last week we were hitting it here in the middle vein, the Tigre Vein as well, that had never really been drilled down in this shale horizon. So what we're looking at there, Merlin, is about 1.5 kilometer strike length where we've hit this, where we've put the holes down to that level. We've hit it on all 3 vein sets now. And we have good evidence that it still continues even further north up into the Protectora area. So
sorry, go on.
So I was just going to say, so we're slowly building out our level of information here along strike and in all 3 vein sets. We're going to jump over to the other side of the mountain as well, where everything comes out on the east flanks, where we have other vein sets over there called Santa Maria. And we're pretty confident we'll see the same kind of aspects happening again over there. Never been drilled.
What's the dip of that formation?
Well, the formations are quite flat lying. They dip gently to the east of about 5-6 degrees, but I consider them to be flat lying. And that's the stratigraphic units. And the veins are quite steep. They normally dip about 80 degrees to the west. Quite predictable, quite easy to follow in that sense.
Now, you've clearly got topographic variations, but what's the kind of, when you're planning, how deep do you consider the footwall zone to be, or the crackle breccia zone, or the shale zone to be from surface?
Well, when we're drilling on the Sooy Vein, and maybe Glenn, maybe you could find a cross section to show this, but because of the hillside drops off to the west, the first vein that we can get drilled to easily is the Sooy Vein. And here we're drilling holes that are typically 300 meters long. We're trying to hit the vein at 200, 250. And then all of a sudden now this footwall thing shows up on the footwall. So some of the holes we're drilling a bit longer now just to make sure that we're getting clear of everything. And you can see here on this section that it's a very flat lying stratigraphy. It's well known, tiger, cliff, flat, and tabular. And the deeper unit that the miners were down into was even called the nodular unit. And that shale horizon, Glenn's just drawing it across there. It's a part of what we call the flat formation. And we didn't really know too much about it until we started drilling these deeper holes down below the Sooy Vein. Glenn's just also sketched on about where the Tigre Vein is, and the other one would be the Seitz Kelley Vein, which would be off this image. And Glenn, maybe you could just flip through a couple of those other slides just to show how, Merlin, how consistent this thing is, both the stratigraphy.
Are your geos getting their eyes in on the stratigraphy? Are you recognizing certain ignimbrite layers, for example, or ash layers, or maybe even the shale themselves, so you actually know where you are in the stratigraphy? I mean, there's some faulting there, but
yeah, these major unit contacts, it's like night and day. When you pass from Tiger to Cliff, night and day. Flat formation, there are 2 or 3 larger sub units within that. Traditionally, they've just all been lumped together, but now the guys are going back and starting to get, starting to recognize that detail. And the first thing to really see is this shale unit. It stands out so differently from all the rest of the ignimbrite inflows.
Is it graphitic?
In places, yes. And that's the interesting thing. Whether there's I don't know what the relationship is yet between the organic materials and the base metals, but they're there together.
Yeah, maybe there's some kind of sulfur relationship, some kind of ligand that caused the precipitation preferentially of the.
Yeah, that's what the guys are suspecting now. But we don't have all the scientific information there on that yet.
What an interesting set of targets you've got. Have you had any chance to do any petrography work on it, or was it? I mean, does it look? You've said it looks structural, but for it, and is there any structural bleed out into the areas? I mean, is it just how does that work? Is it just abruptly contained within the shale, or is there some kind of disturbance, above it and below it?
Well, so far we've had the bad luck of putting a few holes just above the shale going through the areas. It's sterile. There's no evidence of it leaking up past the shale into the upper unit above it. And then we found the same thing below the shale too, when we've gone through the vein and come out into the ignibright and flows below it. There's nothing. So there doesn't seem to be any transfer out of the shale up into the other rock. We're still learning how far laterally does the mineralization extend, but it's going to take a few more holes yet, Merlin, to really understand.
Well, thank you so much. I really feel as if I understand the prospectivity much more. And one of the curious things about it is that because they're at 200 meters below the surface, it's probably unmined. The main vein set is probably less developed. I know you mentioned that some of the some went down 500 meters, but the bulk of that horizon is likely to have been left intact.
It's completely intact. There's absolutely no information. And we have all the mining records, the geological plans, the mining plans, all the old people had no idea that this was going on, just literally 5 meters away from where they were mining. And so that's why we're so keen to get in, to look at the main access tunnel, to get in there early next year. And we can basically walk right to this mineralization. It's going to be fascinating to go in and see it.
Before we leave it, as a wrap up, can you just give an indication of kind of what your drill plans are in terms of meters and the kind of the progress that what you're aiming for next year?
Yeah, good question. We've been operating with 6 diamond drills for the past year. And basically, we're going to start right up again here the first week of January with the 6 machines. We have a program where we have a couple of the machines working on each of the veins in different geographical positions, from the Benjamin, the Sooy, the Seitz Kelley. So we have a task for them all. We've talked about adding in more equipment, more drilling equipment, which more manpower through this new drilling campaign. And so we might end up at 8-10 machines drilling through the year, and all focused on following this shale unit and the veins where they're through it. All
focus on that. You're not testing kind of you really are just concentrating on the junction.
Yeah, for the resource aspect, this style of mineralization, we're pretty confident after talking with our consultants, our mineral resource consultants, that we can be looking at 50-meter spacings to get the first pass through. Whereas if we're just focusing on the narrow vein, we'd have to drill, 25 meters or even closer spaced. So you don't get much progress or much resource unless you're drilling a massive amount of meters. We think we can do the job a lot faster looking at this higher grade aspect where we're passing through the high grade veins and this shale mineralization, which is very high grade as well.
I totally get it. I like it. Great. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Gents, thank you very much. Is there anything else that perhaps you'd like to add that you feel would shed some light on what we've discussed already today?
No, really, I want to thank you, first of all, for the time. I'll get back to you, Dave. We appreciate this, but also thank Dave Duncan. Dave has been 3 weeks now straight in Mexico, just back on the weekend, spent all of last week at the El Tigre camp. So he's fresh in his office, and the first thing he's at this morning, a little earlier here in Halifax. So thank you, Dave, for doing this. But also, Dave, if you had something to add there, I may have cut you off, please.
Well, I would just like to say, Marilyn, that I have the great fortune to work with a fantastic geological team of an administrative team and drilling teams from Mexico. These are top-notch guys. My lead geologists have been with us there from day one on the property. We have fantastic continuity. Our senior people have seen every inch of drill core. So we've really got the benefit of all aspects here of a strong geological team. Our assay turnaround times have been less than 3 weeks all year long. It's a fantastic part of the world to be working in the sense of everything is right there at our fingertips, and it's a real pleasure. And I just want to say thank you for this chat this morning, and nice to say hello. Thanks.
Good meeting you both. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.